It's an enormous pleasure to be here, all from the provinces of Canada. May I have my first slide, please? I like to think I'm verbally dexterous, but I'm lost for words. I'm beyond grateful to be here. I'm massively grateful to the legion of organizers, not just Daniel and Anders, but the lot of you, and to share this with you. Ladies and gentlemen, no x-axes, y-axes will follow. And I was raised in a family that hates many things, but hates the fig jam above all others. The fuck, I'm great, just ask me. And as a result, I'm going to ask you to come on a journey and be my team on this rather than some professorial presentation. But if you only read one medical history book, this is the one to read. The Knife Man. And it's a story of how medicine went from a guild, went from a silly sort of backwater to something approaching respectable and open to ideas from others. And it introduces many marvelous ideas, one of which is the tobacco smoke enema. The very first resuscitation stations, allegedly, were across the Thames River before you had those bridges put in. People would fall in the water. They knew a warm blanket helped, and nicotine was a preganglionic stimulant, neurotransmitter stimulant, and so they would take tobacco smoke, stick this up your bum, and put hot air in. These things are still available on eBay if you don't believe me. My point is, this is believed to be the origin of the expression to blow smoke up one's ass. And I am not here to do such a thing. I am here to talk about crisis management. And for some of you, this will be singing the hymns that you already know, the Black Run Skiers. For some of you, this will be new. For some of you, this will be somewhere in the middle, and perhaps think about how you take these lessons home. When I started my extremely mediocre career, to talk about this was seen as silly. You either intuit this or you can't. You're born with it or you can't. And there is a science, albeit a soft science, behind it. This is my disclosure slide. Peter, Doc, Dad, and Prof, the things I'm proudest of. And I've got absolutely nothing to hide, and I like bringing people together enormously. It's an absolute privilege. But I want you to come on a journey with me. Now, after that rather laborious introduction, here I am. Managing crises, why the human factor is always a factor, why our verbal dexterity should match our manual dexterity, why a team of experts is not always an expert team, and why communication is the most dangerous procedure performed in hospital. But enough aphorisms. This is the take-home slide. I want to give you just a bit of iterative confidence. I went skiing with the redoubtable Ian Beardsill yesterday. What a marvelous man he is. And he's on this journey. How do you get better as a skier? This is the North American in Banff, by the way, close to where I'm from. You're all invited to the basement suite. And we'll go down to Banff together. And how do you get better? You hold your legs a little closer. You learn what those poles are for. You hold your shoulders a bit forward. In other words, it's like James Clear said, it's iterative, additive, small steps, atomic habits, as he called them, and that's how you get better. So there may not be any aha moment here, but let's get this out of the way first of all. What truly matters in what we do? What kills and harms but need not? It's not your factual recall, it's not your manual dexterity, it's as much your ability to work in teams. This is not it's a bit bloody quiet in here, isn't it? This is not an aviation talk, but pilots do many, many things, and where I live, there's a huge number of bush pilots. I use them to go on fishing trips all the time. The point being, every single one of their books starts with this one-liner. Pilots do many things, amongst the easiest is flying the plane. The tools, the tricks, the stuff your sponsors have brought along are essential. But you know what? The softest pillow can be a murder weapon if used inappropriately. So let's learn to use our verbal tools as much as just our manual ones. My dear old mum, more about her tomorrow and my crushing mummy issues tomorrow, or Friday rather, she told me this was her quote. She's a plagiarist. The real problem with humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions. No kidding, people get scared. No kidding, our families get angry. We have medieval institutions, a bit tough, especially those of us from a North American background who believed it was me against the world, I'll show them. and then we get thrown into these colossal bureaucracies, and then God-like technology, but certainly not the God-like wisdom to go along with it. So job one. The computers have been crushing us. Now, we need fail-safes, we need rules, we need to know when we're on-piste and off-piste. Lots of childish ski analogies, I promise. And that's safety one. But the point is about 85% is not stopping the things that go wrong. It's actually identifying, promoting, and sharing the things that go right. That's safety two. It may be our salvation, may actually be one of our biggest tools out of burnout, is a feeling that we can actually contribute. And that's what this conference is about as much as anything, is a chance to get together with our tribe and share these ideas. What else? Well, the great Julian Bean, you can tell how smart he is, he can tie a bow tie, taught me that an MD, a doctor, is a healthcare worker authorized to work outside of guidelines. Now, that's a fascinating one-hand clapping sort of Buddhist quote. It doesn't mean you can do whatever the darn well you please, because you need to take a team with you who aren't necessarily authorized to work outside of guidelines. But similarly, you don't have to just do the algorithm as written. What you need is the verbal dexterity, the team empathy, the social cohesion, the team that was built well ahead of the crisis, to manage your way through that. And similarly, the give and take with the team. Colin Powell was famous for the 40-70 rule. Many others have used it too. It is essentially don't make a decision until you've got 40% of the data. So develop some skills to gather the data and to work out that essential difference between data, information, and meaning, because they're very different things. More about that in a second. Teaser alert. But don't wait until you have more than 70, because often there isn't that time. You have to simultaneously move forward while collecting data. I want us to be proud of being what are called serial simplifiers. I'll read this out to the people at the back. I don't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. This is our job, guys. We should take pride in this. Not bamboozling people with ever more complexity, but taking the complexity in, filtering it through our mind machine, and then working out how that will apply in a stressful situation across a long, flat, snow-covered billiard table, as my dear grandmother used to refer to the part I emigrated in Canada. I am, as my dear wife pointed out, the only man to have written more books than he's read. Here's a free book for you all. C'est dans les deux langues du Canada. It's in both languages. And the point is, it's the sort of Canadian six-pack. It's deliberately short. It can fit into a white coat. You know, those things we used to wear. And it covers just the basics because it was serial simplification. I don't get a bloody penny from this thing, so please download it. This is the probably far better version that Stephen Hearns, I think a fan of this conference, came up with. And his point is that we need engagement, otherwise we don't get involved. We are sort of feral teenagers that need to be excited. And so you need to be aware of that. More about that in a second. Then there's a state of flow, and then there is frazzle when we get the helmet head, monkey brain, where we can't make decisions. Rather than saying, are we good, are we bad, here's a very simple summary of a massive amount of complexity and complication theory. Essentially, this is an airway example. You've got the redoubtable Rich Levitan coming up. But you want somebody to know how to intubate? Well, you know what? What they may need is the green run. The very early on, just put a laryngoscope into a mannequin. Gets a little more complicated. You actually need somebody to understand how to do this in the chaos of teamwork. And actually, you may need somebody who understands where the kit is through the equipment and how we do things and how we authorize admissions. In other words, a bigger understanding of culture. Second teaser for my talk on Friday. ICU, my gig, it's been difficult to define who we are. We're new money. We're not cardiology. We're not even... Well, we're like emergency medicine. We're the new kids on the block. So we've had a tough time defining who we are. I think this is how we define who we are. We're a nexus in the hospital, a node in the hospital, and we manage complexity. 1 step, a 0.95 likelihood of getting it right. 100 steps, a 0.94 likelihood of getting it wrong. So I know what you're thinking. Just give me that laryngoscope. Just let me take care of this. Let's have silence. But one of the things we have to learn is to work in a team whether we like it, because how many steps per patient per day in the ICU? The belief is 180. How many critical steps? About 10 a day. And how do we knit a team together? We communicate. Verbally, non-verbally, paraverbally, more about that in a second. But we don't do it naturally. And I would argue that the ICU is a misnomer, and we need to change the sign over the door to the RRU, the Relationship Repair Unit. Because so much of the time, and this will be the same on your helicopters, people are not there because of a failing in their physiology. They're often there because of a hole in the Swiss cheese medical model. And to say, the other doctors don't know what they're doing, but we do, disrupts that enormously. We resuscitate by voice. I'm sorry, the slides are a little bit off. We resuscitate by voice in the same way that the pilots fly by voice. So say it loud, say it proud, meant is not said is not heard is not understood, understood is not done. And I promise you, that will apply at the side of the ski hill and in the fanciest, shiniest clinic in the US. Or southern Canada, the 11th province, as we now refer to it. By the way, the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, what a load of old bollocks. The Vikings were there 900 years ago. Who's with me? The Gulf of Denmark. Anyway, there are multiple, thank you. Is that it? Is that what I get applause for? The point is there are all of these tools. S-bar you've probably heard to death. But when does it fail? It fails when both sides don't understand it. It fails when the internal medicine resident doesn't put in an R. They just say, I got a sick patient, your problem. Yeah, what would you like me to do? Cuss. This is concerning, I'm uncomfortable, this is a safety issue. If you both understand both sides of it, we're using the same language, then instead of a patronizing dick like me turning to the nurse and saying, well, get comfortable, I understand, they're at DEFCON 1 or they're at DEFCON 2. Multiple other examples. Moving on though, because you cannot not communicate. Even if you say nothing, unfortunately, that communicates a lot. And people will fill in the gaps. It might communicate disinterest. It might communicate hoitiness. And that's not what you intend. So when people do talk about communication, the predominant discussion is about the what you've said. But the data's really clear. How you say it, how you looked when you said it, and the sort of prior interactions mean far, far more. So this is why you double down. This is why we taught people a lot during COVID how to re-emphasize what they'd said and serially simplify what they'd said. Why? Because they had masks on, their eyes were covered, we couldn't rely on verbal and non-verbal communication to the same degree. I communicate healthcare across one of the biggest healthcare districts in the world. It's the size of Western Europe. It truly is. And as a result, the worst thing our city doctors can do is pick up the phone and sort of say, well, have your cardiac surgeon see them. Oh, The point being, we need to understand those phone calls and, in fact, even practice those phone calls, because so much of those golden hours, at least in my gaff, is spent at a nursing home in the middle of nowhere, a nursing station in the middle of nowhere, or on some sort of aviation device. And yes, you are unfortunately guilty for the sins of your fathers and mothers, the prior interactions that have been had. Again, more about that in a second. So be clear, be concise, and be closed loop. Drop C-bombs with aplomb. So John, please intubate and call out the end title. Not perhaps, maybe. It's time to perhaps, maybe intubate, but what do I know? That mitigating language is polite, and so I hear a lot of it in Canada, but it can equally be dangerous, just like the wrong drug at the wrong dose at the wrong time. So what do you have to do? I mentioned Ian once before. This is the second mention of Ian. Took this picture of Ian last night on the left side of the screen here. This is an elite athlete preparing for their ski run, their hockey game beforehand. They're thinking through what'll happen. You watch basketball players, Chris Hicks is the expert on this. You watch basketball players throwing three-pointers, and they actually do a high five, and there's nobody there, because when they practice, that's how they did it. That's what we should be doing. Don't waste that time driving to the base, driving to the hospital, walking down to the emergency department. Use it to pre-plan. It will make you better. Again, Chris's work, beat the stressful. Breathing exercises. Slow down yourself by breathing. Now, I know people think it works the other way around. Once you're calm, your breathing slows down, but you can actually force the cycle the other way. Self-talk is fine. I don't mean my high school guidance counselor was right and I'm awful. I should never have done this. I should have been a postman. Just me. I actually mean we've got this, we can do this, airway, breathing, circulation, airway, breathing, circulation. Mental rehearsal, as I talked about, and focusing with a trigger word. And often for our emergency departments, that is, we're only going to do this, 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 and then we're going to ship the patient out of the emergency room. A fantastic way to engage people. This is Cliff Reed's magnificent 0-point survey. Simon's here in the audience. We were both lucky enough to be involved in this. In short, and I don't like that many words on a slide, but here's the point. Don't waste that time before the patient arrives. Use that time to build the team. I know you think it's like Bohemian Rhapsody. You're just doing the song that everybody knows the words of. But the other aspect to communication is the whole time you're building the team, nurturing the team, empowering the team, telling them you appreciate them being here. Before the pre-primary survey, or before the primary survey. And what about this? I've done a lot of work on how you identify juniors versus seniors so it doesn't just become a wet finger in the wind, do you pass or not? Let me give you a simple example. There is always somebody sitting in the corner of the room who just is focused on one thing but can't see the big picture. As you get more senior, you can synthesize it, put it together, and as you get much more senior, you can say, and if that fails, we'll do the following. Which is why, with enormous respect, I can't have you intubate this patient because we're already planning Step 2, 3. Take the idea and go further. There's a huge difference between data, numbers, interpretation, a correlation of those numbers, and meaning, where are we going? And honestly, guys, the medical charts are full of shite. SATs are this, heart rate's this, blood pressure's this. My sense is he's been dying for the last 3 weeks. Is that accurate? Yeah, that's why I wrote guarded prognosis. The word guarded means hidden. I'm sorry for this long ramble, but I'm still a tad upset. My point being, there's always somebody in the corner of a room during a resuscitation saying, the SATs are 80, the SATs are 80, the SATs are 80. It's always in a slightly camp voice like that too. What you want is that person to be quiet and or to say, the SATs are coming up to 80, keep doing what you're doing. The SATs are down to 80, it's time to change plans. And meaning, one more attempt and then we're cutting the neck. Moving on. Teamwork. 4 brave men or women who do not know each other will not attack a lion. 4 less brave and sure of mutual aid will attack resolutely. Look at your team. Which of these conditions are they in? Are they unaware? Are they relaxed and ready? Vigilance is an interesting word. Vigilance is in a lot of anesthesia societies' mottos. In other words, it means ready to go. They're not being paid for brilliance, thank goodness. They're being paid for vigilance, not Sudoku, not Wordle. They're being paid to be present. What about action, gross motor? We know, studies done on Royal College anesthetists and intensivists, only about 40% of people can find that cricothyroid in an emergency situation. So practice ahead of time. Mark it on the patient's neck. Fly ahead of the plane. Learn the baseball diamond technique for the laryngeal handshake. You're welcome. And don't be surprised that people get tunnel visioned and can't see the whole thing. So if they're in system 1, airway, breathing, circulation, you deliberately step back and do system 2, the whole around the room. And we put tape down on our floor so that if you're in the system 1 side of the room, you better be doing stuff. And if you're in the system 2, you better be thinking about stuff. And then, of course, there's black, where you sit in the corner and paint pictures of the Indian continent in the back of your trousers. Psychology. If you understand the psychological forces of fear and abandonment, things start to make sense. In other words, they are logical from a psychological point of view. This is why Stanley Milgram could get people to give electric shocks. This is why Zimbardo could get mathematicians to say 2 + 2 = 5, because 4 of the colleagues already had that. And this is why, if you don't know about Dunbar's number, you really should. There are believed to be 3 Dunbar's numbers, 8, 15, and 8, 30, and 150. I guess I should know about them. And they are the size that military units have been since the days of Sparta. And there are ways we interact in those groups. And we know that if we've got more than 8 people, intuitively, this resuscitation could get a bit bogged down. And we know 8 people around a meeting table is tricky. We used to joke in my place where we had 8 intensivists, if 7 people vote one way and 1 person votes the other, what's that? A tie. The point is, you need to understand these human factors of how you run things. Here's another very quick human factor. Which one's the real Elvis? Well, you know from pattern recognition, it's the chappie on the left side of the screen. Computers can now do this, but it took them a heck of a long time. $2 calculators have been able to do this since day immemorial, though. Now, there'll be somebody in the audience, there will be a Sheldon from Big Bang Theory somewhere in this audience who knows that it's 507. But would they know that under stress? Because we've done no end of studies on simulation mannequins and asked routine questions like, what's the dose of epinephrine? And this is where you come in and from a system 2 point of view and say, keep doing what you're doing, I'll do the drug stuff. Keep doing what you're doing, I'll get the surgeons down here. In other words, you go in and you look for a way to be a good follower and a good helper. Diane Fossey talked about gorillas in the mist. There is a whole pseudoscience of psychology experiments of gorillas we have missed and gorillas in our midst. Some of you will know this one of the basketballs being bounced, and if you don't, look it up. But there's been a whole bunch since. There's been videos where somebody in the background just says 19 times, I am a gorilla, I am a gorilla, I am a gorilla. I missed it. There are studies where they've put gorillas on CT scans and had radiologists review them, and they don't see them either. This is not a human failing. This is a failing to understand the complexity of human behavior and how we cross-monitor each other. Rudeness is a profoundly iatrogenic thing. Risk in studies are worth a read, how they destroy diagnostic, therapeutic ability, and destroy teamwork just by injecting snarky comments. By the way, they're also an incredible demonstration of how iatrogenic it is to be a horrible, poisonous family member. And you and I need to do some self-examining on that. Do we take them aside and say, this isn't helping anyone? Do we take them aside and work on our own A-game so that we don't criticize them for it? I don't know. The point is, there's a whole field of how you put your own oxygen mask on before helping those around you. And how you and I find time and space within what seems like a place that has no time and space. Between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is the power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. If that's a bit woo-woo, then here we go. Where are you? Red light, orange light, green light. And why do you practice? To move yourself from freeze and fixate to delay where you contemplate, to automatic. And by the way, there are pluses and minuses and all. You can get stalled and you can just reflex act incorrectly. What do you need in a team? You need system 1, predator, focus. I only care about these things. You need system 2, a vigilance and a scanning. And there is that word vigilance all over again. Very simple answers from Canada. Very simple examples. This is my good friend Marie-Claude Vizina, a French-Canadian who came to work in our Anglophone system. Superb resuscitator, was a bit uncomfortable with her language, and also was all about the hands and not so much about the verbal dexterity. We spent, I think it was $1 American, so $50 Canadian, and we wrapped a sock around her eyes and made her blind. And the rest of this team improved massively and started volunteering information. The blood's in, would you like another one? They moved beyond data, the blood pressure's 80, on to it's still 80 and the blood's already in, what do you think we should do next? It's amazing to take away somebody's vision and their other figurative vision improve that much. It's required by law that I put a Canadian picture on I think somewhere. There'll be hockey players later, I promise you. Again, that's the 11th province down at the bottom, those psychopathic bullies. But that's my hometown, Edmonton. And we do a massive amount of our resuscitation over the telephone. And we practice these things. And for those of you thinking we need a simulation program, but I can't afford the mannequins, this is incredibly low cost, incredibly high fidelity, and I can share all of our scenarios with you. The fascinating part for us is we bring the operators on, and they add the real little extra touch where they say candidate 1 and candidate 2 said approximately the same thing, but I promise you the doctor will be upset with that answer and happier with this one. Why do I know that? Because I do these phone calls all the time. Talk to me afterwards if you're interested in doing this. The last thing I want to talk about is this 60-to-1 ratio comes up all the time in what we do. There are 60 papers written on intubation for every one on extubation. Extubation is the red-headed foster child of what we do. We need to focus on it. You want to be famous? Write papers on extubation. Similarly, write papers on followership. How to be a good followership, which is what 80% of us are, rather than just wanting to be a leader. And ectopic airways. Again, Richard's going to talk about airways, so I hope this is just the bad comedy act setting him up. But look what happens. You want to talk about fig jams? Look what happens with airway guidelines. Yep, yeah, this is what I need in a crisis situation. Yeah, I'll be able to read this from 30 feet across the wall. So this is why I'm a fan of Vortex, and I'm a fan of things that simplify. But they don't accept the importance of crisis management. Again, back to Chris's work, the fact that when the stuff hits the fan, we talk teamwork and it collapses into task work. And that's why it's your fault, it's your fault. Oh, I thought we were a team up until 2 minutes ago. What else? Early warning systems. The respiratory rate is the most useful vital sign, so teach it, teach it, teach it. It is your red light, orange light, green light. And if you've got trainees and you teach them nothing more in 5 minutes than, tell me, do you think this patient is in immediate peril? Could go either way. They're doing all right. We can sign them over to somebody else. You possibly will save more lives than any other 5 minutes. Simple example in our place, we were debating whether to have Sugamadex, Bridion, and we thought, well, that'd be nice. But when you include human factors, it's 2 minutes for the drug to work, and it's 7 minutes for somebody to think of it, find the key, get it from the cupboard, mix it up. Once you start seeing the world through human factors, you realize this is glottic impersonation. I hope you can see. That's the goose on the right. Yes, you would put the tube in the esophagus. Stop thinking you're so clever. Because you want to see it, you want it to be the right hole. Be aware of this as we move from DL to VL. And the very last thing is attitudina. Ectopia is dangerous. Attitudina is even worse. In Canada, the first answer to any Royal College exam question is, this is complicated, I would get help. And so we went into some sites that had had some airway disasters where they hadn't been asking for help. And we said, how come you didn't ask for help? And they said, because last time I did, they were extremely rude to me. And we thought, yeah, we get that. That's not just you being soft. It's iatrogenic rudeness. Just out of interest, when did you last ask for help? And they said 10 years ago. And so the point is not whether you need to just take it, or whether other people need to. It's that afferent-efferent loop of give, take, work together, and be part of your institution. I don't know if this can be read from the back, but be prepared. You have no idea when the shitstorm will ensue. Or to quote Oscar Wilde, if you want something a little more academic, what you read about when you have the time influences the person you are when you have no time. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.